So there you go. This is John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk with John and Regan. We do have Regan back this week. Regan, it's great to have you again.
Always good to be back.
All right. Look, I gotta offer my thanks again to Janine Yazzie for stepping up. She was gonna be our guest, and she turned out to be my guest host, co-host. So she did a great job, and I know Reggie, you were commenting on how well she did as well. Phenomenal job. Hey, before we get started, and we're going to have a spirited conversation here, but before we get started, I want to essentially reiterate what Reggie said before the show. We really do need you to step up and support the program, support the radio station, but I want you to support the radio station via Let's Talk. So please do go to the pledge line, go to 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602. Make a pledge of any size, and you can become a continuing donor by becoming a WBAI buddy. And if you do it in the name of the show, look, here's the way things are working out. We're not doing the same. You're not doing pledge drives the same way, and so this is kind of an experiment. Every 6 weeks, I'm going to be off the air, and they're going to do a specific fundraising show. So. That doesn't mean that I don't need you guys to step up and make a donation while I'm doing my show. I mean, I do. We need to send a message that you are listening, that you approve of this show, and actually more than that you approve, that you tune into this show. Look, I also have the luxury. We're being my Let's Talk Native show is being aired by WPFW, another Pacifica station down in Washington D.C. So I've got two significant urban populations, radio markets that get to hear Regan and I here on Thursdays, and then my Let's Talk Native show that airs on in Washington on Fridays. So. We need your feedback, and one of the ways that we there's a lot of talk about voting. You need to vote with your dollars, and if you make a contribution to WBAI and you listen to this show, and look, I realize there's a lot of programs on WBAI, and all of us producers are asking you to do the same thing. Donate in the name of their show. Well, I'm asking you to do the same thing. So please make a contribution to WBAI. Keep us on the air. Keep us going. This is a unique station. I think that we have a unique show. We offer a perspective you're not going to get anywhere else. There's no other show like this in the New York radio market. And what we're delivering is not just a Native perspective, but two Native perspectives. And Regan and I come from different places. We're both Native peoples, but we come from different regions. I live on a Native territory still, and that's where I'm broadcasting from, and Regan's in the city. So we tie our experiences from where we come from, where we live now, and the issues that we face together. And we're going to talk about that's exactly what we're talking about today. So please do go to the pledge line again, 516-620-3602, or go online to www.give2wbai.org. That's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI.org, and make your contribution to WBAI, and do it in the name of this program, and we greatly appreciate it. All right. I'll probably bring that up later on the show, but all right. So here's, again, Regan and I, we put our heads together before we do the show, and whether we have a guest or whether we just have a topic that we think that we should have the conversation on air, as we will today. We come up with an idea, and so here's what I wanted to discuss, and in a way, I talked about this a little bit on my last Let's Talk Native show. What happens on November 4th? I mean, look, the world is in a crazy place right now, and there's a lot of unrest in a lot of countries, but not the least of which in the United States. I mean, and it isn't even just for all of those people who've been poking the racism issue so much for over the years with the intention of trying to start a race riot. This isn't even a racial civil war. It is an ideological one. And so, I mean, which actually has race has a heavy hand in, don't get me wrong. But So things are really, really crazy. I mean, let's face it. People are shooting each other in the streets, and over, over this ideological split. And of course, you've got a whole lot of resources on the right. You have some resources on the left, but then you have a whole nother group of people, and it's not even fair to call them one group, but masses of people who, frankly, are not crazy with the right or the left right now. So when I spoke with Regan and when we talked, I said, "What's your thoughts on what happens on November 4th?" And we can look at it in two different ways. I want to talk about a Biden declared victory or a Trump declared victory, even if it might not be declared till who the hell knows, December, I don't know. So that's the premise, and I know you didn't hesitate, Regan. You said, "Yeah, we should have this conversation."
Absolutely. I feel like it's important because for me, no matter if it's Biden or if it's Trump, for me personally, not a lot changes. Ideologically, the Democratic and the Republican parties are more similar than either of them like to admit.
Yeah.
And they participate in many narratives that are problematic, including capitalism and imperialism and continued colonialism.
And law and order, of course.
Absolutely. It's not like the Democratic Party is trying to abolish the police.
Yeah.
That's not the reality. So for me, both of them, both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, are just maintaining the status quo. The difference is let's say Trump wins, all right? Let's say Trump wins another 4 years. That, for me, isn't that crazy because he was already elected once. That was crazy. The second time around, not so horrible. Like, it's still horrible and intimidating and terrifying, but Trump is the president that was voted in for a particular reason, which is that many Americans feel the way that he does.
Right.
And I think that's what's disturbing for people, is to come to terms with the fact that there are Americans that support him, which means that there are Americans with this ideological praxis based in overt racism. Now, that doesn't differ much from Biden. The difference is that Democrats like to do this introvert racism, where microaggressions maintain the status quo versus macroaggressions. But in the end, both parties are more similar than they'd like to admit.
Well, and again, look at the Biden ticket. You've got the crime bill guy, and you've got a former top cop in California, a prosecutor who clearly did not press for reform and police reform or judicial reform. She has has a pretty strong record for not necessarily disclosing everything that that a suspect needs. I mean, she was all about prosecution. She was all about convictions and not necessarily about justice or truth. And
she's a cop.
Yeah, exactly.
She's a bully. She's a bully. She made a career on and maintaining truancy laws, putting parents in jail because their kids didn't go to school. Specifically, Black parents in jail because they didn't go to school. Kamala Harris is garbage.
Well, and from a Native perspective, I think and I've mentioned this before. She also has a bad track record for the Native territories that were trying to do fee to trust applications. In other words, try to expand their land holdings. She made the argument as the state attorney general against all of those fee to trust applications, and then she takes a position. Well, that's because I worked at the pleasure of the governor. I don't think that's necessarily true, but regardless, that's her excuse. She also was not, she was pretty harsh when it came to gaming in California, native gaming as well. So, and again, I always have to qualify this. Just because I will speak out against Biden and Harris, that doesn't mean that I support Trump. Don't get me wrong. I think Trump is one of the worst human beings to ever sit in the office, and I'm not saying by a long shot. I'm just saying that he is one of them, and there have been plenty of them. and I don't think it's unreasonable that he could win. And I'll give you a few reasons. Not the least of which is what you brought up. Yeah, he was elected once. However, the system is skewed to help Republicans win. That's what the whole electoral college is. That all the gerrymandering that the Republicans have got away with. And it's got to be noted that over half the Senate supports Donald Trump. And so the voter or all the people who vote for those senators are going to support Trump. Over half the governors in the United States support Trump. They're Republicans, and the states are the ones who control elections. It's not controlled by Congress. It's controlled at the state level. He has essentially turned the post office up on its head. As just reported before the show, he's trying to make a mockery of the election process. He's telling people to vote by mail and then go and try to vote in person as well. I mean, his argument is that if the system really works, you won't be allowed to vote twice. So he's literally telling people, try to commit the crime and see if it goes, so I can prove my point. So he's telling people to vote twice. I mean, it's an absurd thing. So, but this is the power of incumbency. He's got the Justice Department. He's got control of the military, even as some of the military support may fade. He controls that. He also has every police union in the United States endorsing him. So anybody who thinks this is, it's absurd and that, Biden's going to win by a landslide, I don't think that's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying that I don't think that Biden can win, but I think the landslide that people are thinking are going to happen isn't going to be there.
My thing also is everyone thought Hillary was going to win by a landslide.
Yeah.
Like, everyone thought that, because what I want to remind people, if you live in a blue state or a blue city, is that you live in a bubble. The people you interact with, it's a bubble. It's something that I was reminded very quickly in terms of my own political beliefs, is that what I believe is shared with the community that I share. But once I leave that community, people don't think that America should be abolished, because that's what I think. People don't think that way. And even in blue cities and blue states where they're less extremist than my own belief system, you live in a bubble. If you leave your community, if you leave that space, there are so many people in the occupied United States that do not think the way you do, who do not believe things the way you do, who do not see Trump as a threat in the way that you do. And that's why, for me, it's so annoying when I find Democrats more annoying than Republicans. Republicans are just ridiculous. Democrats think that they're progressive, but are actually maintaining horrible ideological racism, horrible ideological imperialism under the guise of being, relatively progressive. That's but it's not actual progression.
Well, and that's kind of where I want take the conversation, because here's again, if we look at the two scenarios, right? I mean, if Trump wins, what does the average American do? Well, I'll tell you, the average Democrat will do what they always do, which is nothing. They'll huddle up and they'll cry foul and they won't do much of anything. But there is a ever-growing population that we are a part of, that you are a part of, especially in the city, which is the activist community who rejects a lot of what Trump is doing and his police forces and his aggression and all that stuff. So if Trump wins, what does Black Lives Matter do? What do the anti-fascists do? Is there going to be revolt in the street? I don't know. I don't see that kind of pressure. So. I hope so too, but I don't necessarily see it from the Democratic Party. I see it coming from the people who reject status quo, because again, we flipped a coin a little bit here. So if Biden wins, I think many people that I talk to are convinced that it's all just going to be more status quo, just exactly what you're talking about. So again, I think not only will you have the people who are in the streets today, if not revolt, certainly going to try like hell to hold him accountable, but then there's all the Trumpers. And these guys are already arming themselves. Look, I mentioned on my last program, if you want to go buy body armor or a gun or bullets because you think of something terrible is going to happen, you're already too late. That stuff's already been bought up. I mean, this is how how delicate the situation is. So when I think about the day after the election, or more accurately, the day after a declaration of victory, or if there ever will be a concession, and I don't know that either side is going to necessarily concede. I know Trump won't. I mean, he'll and he's got from November until January to have his Justice Department cry foul. Look, he also has the Supreme Court on his side. Don't forget. So it is a real recipe for disaster. And of course, you throw into the mix, this COVID-19 pandemic that is probably prone for a resurgence about Election Day, because all the kids are going back to school. Colleges are already running into trouble bringing students back. I mean, New York City had to delay the opening of in-person schools until later in the month, I think. Isn't that what de Blasio just announced?
Yes, from my understanding, that's the intent. And actually, some schools will, private schools, I was speaking to two of my friends who are both private school teachers. This is insanity. The teachers can work from home, virtually teach the class, but the students are expected to go to school. So they go to school, but the teachers are virtual. And there's only like a couple of teachers and administrative staff that are actually there in order to, quote unquote, maintain order. So that is happening. That's happening currently. As I said, I spoke to two of my friends who are teachers at this specific private school, and that's what they're doing.
Wow. I mean, and look, I understand the teacher's perspective. They know it's an unsafe environment, but the fact that the kids still have to go, and the people who will be, running the buildings, I guess. I mean, look, this is a recipe for disaster. There hasn't been, look, since the recent surge, which is still part of the first surge essentially. It's still they're still adding 1,000 deaths a day, and of course they've slowed down on the testing, so the number of confirmed tests per day appears to be going down. But they were testing over 1 million a day, and now they're below 800,000 a day. So, and that's on Trump's wishes. So, no, this thing is gonna go very, very badly. And of course, the people who are most adversely affected by that are black and brown people, people who are the lowest rungs of American income class and that kind of stuff. So it's going to be bad. And I know everybody's trying to remain optimistic, but neither party has a solution. I mean, you hear nothing but babbling coming out of Joe Biden when anybody asks him specifically. I mean, it's fine to say, well, here's what Trump should have done, but you're saying that now. Who was saying any of that stuff then? Who was prepared to tell these freewheeling Americans what they can and can't do? I mean, you've got people who want to riot in the street over having masks imposed upon them. I mean, it's the insanity is incredible. It's incredible.
Well, I want to rewind really fast just to a statement that you made earlier, which is like, what happens on November 4th? And what will people do in reaction to Trump or Biden? And what I think is really important for folks who are listening to understand is that whether Biden or Trump is in office, young Black people will still be murdered by the police. It does not matter who is in office, because this is a larger issue than Biden and Trump. This is systemic racism that has been born out of what this country was made from, which is stolen indigenous land and slave labor. That is the crux of this. So for me, what is scary is that if Biden wins, I think a lot of leftists will stop showing up when they need to show up, because a Band-Aid has been put on a bullet hole. And Biden is that Band-Aid.
Yeah, the whole there we did it, attitude will. Yeah, and of course you only have to listen to how much Biden and Harris are trying to assert themselves as the incoming law and order administration, and he's condemning you know, the way people are reacting in the street. I mean, he sounds a lot like Trump when it comes to you know, what needs to happen to those who riot. And you know, look, the looting stuff, it's not nearly as prevalent as people are making it out to be. But you know what? What happened when the Black Wall Street, Tulsa and Greenwood was looted? You know, who paid a price for that? And who paid a price for Rosewood? Who paid a price for Sand Creek? Nobody did. So when I hear this now, it is just so frustrating because you start to run out of ways to be heard as your people are being murdered in the streets.
And who cares about items? Who cares about property? Who sees property and items as more valuable than people? That is what it boils down to. They have looted, they have stolen from us as people of color more than we could ever loot from these stores. Mm-hmm. It is incredible. It is incredible to me that people are like, oh, look at these people looting. Who cares? Those are from large corporations. They're not actually seeing any damage.
Yeah, but let's be honest. They don't care either. This is just they're just using this as an excuse to react violently. Whether it's the cops, whether it's these militia groups. I mean, this little white boy who crosses the state line with his mama's gun, he didn't go there to protect property. He went there to shoot people. That's what a gun's for.
And the fact that he was apprehended the day after, the fact that there was no reaction to him by the police, the fact that the National Guard and the police offered him and his buddies water before he went and murdered people on the streets, murdered people who were trying to protect other people from him.
Yeah.
Because he pulled his gun out and he tripped. And so one of the people came with a skateboard and tried to get the gun out of his hands because he was shooting.
Yeah.
And that person was murdered. Like, this is like, and then because he had shot someone in the head.
Well, and perhaps in the back as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, this isn't what people need to understand about this is that the exercise, he's also 17 years old.
Yeah, he illegal possession of a firearm at that age. I mean, anyway, and he crossed the state line to do it. I mean, this is a federal offense. I don't even understand how it's turned into. You know, I mean, look, I think the Kenosha police speaking
at the Trump rally. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they'd have had him. Look, they'd have had him there if they could have. There's no question about that.
They will. He will be an icon. He will have a book out. People will come to his aid. There will be such incredible.
Churches have. I think they've raised over $100,000 for him already. Yeah. I mean, it's and you know and so when we talk about who supports that side, and you know, I still can't get away from the evangelical right ignoring all of the moral turpitude that Trump is responsible for, whether it's cheating on wives or paying off porn stars or his vulgar language that he uses, racist language that he uses, and yet the evangelical right wants to say that but we can look the other way on that stuff as long as he gives us Supreme Court nominees. I mean, it's just an insane. I mean, talk about deals with the devil if you're a Christian. I mean, which I'm not, but if you were, I mean, this is like the most insane scenarios I've ever seen.
The only religion in the United States is, people are going to say, oh, it's Christianity. No, it is capitalism.
Yeah, it's money.
Capitalism is the religion of the settler state. Mm-hmm. People will do anything to maintain wealth, to maintain property, to hoard resources. That is the only religion. Even these people who come through and are like, oh, he's a godly man. It's not about godliness. It's about finances.
Yeah.
So, and that's why when Trump was elected, of course, I was upset like many people were. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that Trump is the president that the United States deserves.
I say that more often than I say anything else. Yeah.
Literally the epitome of everything that this country was built on, what it stands for, the way that it exercises. And of course, Democrats would be devastated to hear that. But I remind folks that under Obama, more people were deported in his first 4 years than any point in history. That under Obama, there were still bombings in Syria. This is not about presidencies. This is about settler colonialism.
He upped the ante with drone strikes. He was killing people at the highest rate with remote drone strikes than of any other president in history. He obviously the Patriot Act stayed intact during his administration. His promises about Guantanamo Bay never happened, of course. And again, from a native standpoint, he's the Dakota Access Pipeline president.
Yes, he is the Dakota Access Pipeline president. Yeah. He is also the president who stood by while multiple young Black men were shot and murdered by police.
Yep.
Like, this is not about presidencies, because presidencies are just they are distractions.
They're nameplates.
Are distractions. Yeah. So
they're name tags. Yeah. Yeah.
I find like, as people know, I don't support the vote. I think we should be out on the streets rioting. I think, like, I don't believe that this needs that any sort of election could ever fix the issues that are really at the root of this country.
Well, I come down and say that you're not going to pray it away and you're not going to vote it away. Whatever the problems that have been, that are there from its origins. I mean, and I'm not just talking about slavery and genocide. The whole thing was geared towards wealthy white men and it still is. I mean, and you still have, wealthy white men, even when you prop up an occasional person of color, whether it's Barack Obama or Kamala Harris. It's you gotta recognize that. Look, they were raised with significant white influence as well. So I mean, it's like, it isn't the change that people. Look, to vote for Biden because you oppose Trump. Here's the problem. This guy's going to think that he has a mandate. He's going to think that that he was voted in, not that Trump was voted out. And to me, that's a dangerous message to send.
I think of Zoe Leonard's poem, which is "I Want a Dyke for President," and in the whole poem, she goes through and says all of the things that she wants actually in a president, including that she wants someone who is actually, I'll use they them pronouns because I'm actually not sure how they identify, but in the poem, Zoe says, "I want a dyke for president. I want a person with AIDS for president. I want a fag for vice president. I want someone with no health insurance. I want someone who grew up in a place where the earth is so saturated with toxic waste that they didn't have a choice about getting leukemia. I want a president that had an abortion at 16. I want a candidate who isn't the lesser of two evils. I want a president who lost their last lover to AIDS, who still sees that in their eyes every time they lay down in the forest, who held their lover in their arms and knew they were dying. I want a president with no air conditioning, a president who has stood in a line at a clinic, at the DMV, at the welfare office, and has been unemployed and laid off and sexually harassed and gay bashed and deported. I want someone who has spent the night in the tombs and had a cross burned on their lawn. I want someone who has been loved and had been hurt, who respects sex, who had made mistakes and learned from them. I want a Black woman for president. I want someone with bad teeth, someone who has eaten hospital food, someone who cross-dresses and has done drugs and has been in therapy. I want someone who has committed civil disobedience. I want to know why this isn't possible. I want to know why we started learning somewhere down the line that a president is always a clown, always a John and never a hooker, always a boss and never a worker, always a liar, always a thief, and never caught." And that poem from 1992 has really shaped my own beliefs in what presidency looks like. Because unless any of the candidates fit this, then they actually cannot enact change. Because nobody has experienced, the people who are running, the people who are in many positions of political power have never experienced literally anything on this list.
Right.
How could they ever be a voice for the people if they had an Ivy League education? If they, and I'm not saying that we all have to be informed by trauma, but we are informed by trauma.
Well,
Just
and
for me,
the only part that
it's an incredible exercise of privilege.
the only place I depart from that is I don't want a president.
Exactly. That's my point. Like,
So,
I don't want a president because there never could actually.
Yeah.
I don't believe in
Yeah.
presidency at all.
Yeah.
But that poem for me was actually realization as to why one of the reasons I don't want a president
Absolutely.
is because there would never be someone, because the system is based in a certain way that nobody from that poem could ever be a president.
Of course not.
For any of those reasons.
And
so
the crazy
why,
part is that some people think that Trump being such an outlier, broke the mold, and he's anything but that, and that's the reality. Hey, Regan, we're at the bottom of the hour, so let's take a break. We'll go out, give me a chance to sip of water here, and we'll come right back. We'll go out with a tune and come right back. This is John Kane with Regan DeLoggins, and this is Let's Talk on WBAI. All right, thanks for coming back. Yeah, that's Murray Porter. Someday I'll never learn, and that song is part humorous, but it's also very true. This is what we see time and time again: people repeating the same mistakes. Hey, before we get back into it, a couple of things. We are operating in this era of COVID-19, so we're doing remote broadcasting. We're doing the best we can, considering we can't all get together in the same studio the way we used to. So I do encourage people to check out the show on podcast. If you're having any trouble with the audio today, check us out. If you're not subscribed to my podcast, well, you should be. So by all means, go online and subscribe to Let's Talk Native podcast. Let's Talk Native with John Kane podcast, and on those among those podcasts are my WBAI shows. You can also go on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. This program is posted up as a video. It's unfortunately it's me just with still shots of Regan for now, but you can catch the shows after the fact, and of course you can go to WBAI's archives as well. But I just want to say that I think we're accomplishing this thing, but there's some sacrifice to it all. I do want to remind people that we do need your support. We need your sponsorship. We are listener-sponsored radio, so I encourage people to go to the pledge line. Go to 516-620-3602. Make a pledge of any size to WBAI, and do it in the name of this program. And look, sooner or later we're going to get this thing back the way we used to do it. And we'll be taking calls and doing all that good stuff again. But until then, we're doing the best we can, but we still need your support. And so I do encourage people to support WBAI and do it in the name of this show. You can become a WBAI buddy. You can go online, go to www.give2wbai.org. That's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI.org. I greatly appreciate it. And you're getting something that you may not agree with what Regan and I are serving up today, but part of what our conversation is what happens. I mean, how's the left going to react to a right win? How's the right going to react to a left win? And how are all these people? Because I'm not sure they fit into either one of those boxes. Folks like Regan and I, and these cities and these states are filled with people like us who are not. Who don't have blinders on, with jackasses and elephants covering our eyes. So that's really the conversation that we're trying to have, and that we're trying to throw out there, so people can prepare. I mean, I wonder what the average. I mean, from the activist community, Regan, what's your thoughts on how? Is anybody talking about what happens after November?
I think that if you are a community organizer and are committed to the abolition of prisons, of cops, of the settler state, then this election is a distraction. I think that if you are doing activist work with nonprofits or with politicians, then this election could mean everything. So I think it's different in the activist community or the community organizing community, because we, even within the community, have very differing politics and have very differing praxis. So for me, like I said, I really don't care which one gets elected because both of them are garbage, and I don't participate in bipartisan or electoral politics.
But the election does have consequences, and I say that because there is going to be reaction. I mean, if Trump wins, he and his people, including these armed militias, are going to feel validated. If he loses, they're going to be angry and they're going to resist. And to a lesser extent, you're going to see the same thing on the left. I mean, are people going to be outraged if Trump wins? You know, again, as far as the progressive left, I don't see a progressive left reaction in that way.
I think that, unfortunately, I believe the progressive left will not react in the way that we want it to. We saw how the progressive left reacted the first time he won, and it was a peaceful women's march that has now become a social occasion and has been specifically criticized for being racist and transphobic. Yeah. So we already see what happens when progressives are bummed. And it's super disappointing. Now, we haven't seen what Republicans do in a larger arena. Like, we've seen these militias, we've seen these white supremacist groups, we've seen what they do, and it's complete and utter violence. It's violence and chaos with the support of police. That is what it is. Now, what is it going to look like when your everyday Republican is angered by this? I think you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be, if he wins again, it's validation for their ideology, which means that they will continue to exercise their privilege. Mm-hmm. If Biden wins, I feel as though there will be anger and violence, extreme anger and violence against, again, people of color, because we are the most targeted. And I also think that in 2 years, in 3 years, these people that have become overt will go back into the shadows, but continue to organize. We know militias have existed for forever, but the Bugaloo Boys or whatever, the Proud Boys, those are just the overt ones. Those are the ones that we see in the streets. There are hundreds of thousands of people who are organizing against the progressive left, and they are armed. They are, and they have a legacy. We're talking about the KKK. We're talking about...
And again, to your point, it's not just that they're organizing against the progressive left. They're organizing against anybody of color. They're organizing against black people. They're organizing against Native people. They're organizing against, any brown people. So no, it isn't, and that's why I say it is ideological, but it's steeped deeply in some of the racial tensions that continue to exist in the United States.
And I think that what is scary for me is that we need to, within the community organizing groups, we need to start talking about what's going to happen depending on either election and start coming up with contingency plans, because unfortunately, many of us organize in times of crisis because there are people literally being murdered by cops in the street or being shot and maimed, or there are people starving or people being evicted from their homes or being deported. Those need immediate action, which makes it difficult sometimes to organize long term. To see what's happening in 2 months is hard when you're just trying to get people food today. Mm-hmm. So I think that these conversations about what's going to happen, people are starting to be like, oh, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about this. But I really do urge community organizers, and honestly, this is a challenge for myself as well, is to begin talking about contingency plans post-election. Because either way, there will be violence. If Biden wins, like I said, unfortunately, because of systemic racism, a person of color is still going to be shot in the streets by a cop. If Trump wins, you have that same issue and militias who are validated.
Well, if Biden wins, the militias are going to. If Biden wins, I think there's going to be more of these 17-year-old kids with guns. I mean, this doesn't bode very well, and I think, I don't know how. I don't know the value even in even making overtures to people on the left or the right. I mean, I don't, but I'd like to take the temperature a little bit, you know, and look, I said, the COVID-19 is going to exacerbate the situation. We haven't even fully experienced the economic fallout that has, that is yet to come. I mean, from, shutting things down from March, and there's all of this this unemployment stuff and the supplemental unemployment insurance stuff. This stuff is all just starting to have effect. Kids going back to school, schools who don't have budgets anymore. All these states lost their money, and of course, Trump is still president until January. So what's going to take place between now and January, in terms of how much he's going to, try to undermine Democrat, governors or state legislatures? I mean, and how much he's going to try to punish them. I mean, we're seeing that every single day. Look, this thing, I don't see a path forward that's pleasant in any way, shape, or form.
I think we've hit a point of no return. And I think we hit it a while back, but I think now a lot of other people are witnessing it. And I think a lot of that has to do with, of course, the growth of social media, because there's an access to not just cameras to film things like violence happening, but also to spread information, knowledge on both sides. I think people have become more radicalized on both the right and the left. Mm-hmm. And people who don't identify with right or left, who are becoming more radicalized as well. So I think that this is and I'm going to say this, and I feel as I laugh because I know my father is listening, and I feel like he will have an opinion about what I'm about to say, which is that I think we are at an unprecedented moment in history. And I know that sounds so... Right. So, yeah, it's so like self-involved, like we are so important. Yeah. So I know that we'll have a great conversation about that afterwards. But I really do think we're in an unprecedented time in history in terms of the way and the access to knowledge and the way that has shaped politics and social justice, as well as how people react to that. We know that social media can change elections, but we also know that social media can change the public's opinion without facts. Right. I mean, this whole... Like we joked about the fake news stuff at the beginning of Trump's election, but now, or at the beginning of his term, rather, and but now, and it's a joke now. It's a joke, but but it's true. People were informed by that. I know people who are informed and saw the media, and yes, the media is the enemy in a lot of ways, but like truly, we're like, no, that's fake news. That's not even happening. That never happened. I feel like Trump has created. Not just Trump, because again, racism existed before Trump. It will exist after Trump. Imperialism existed before Trump. It will exist after Trump. Like, I don't want to say that he is the crux of this, but I do think that the way that he manipulated social media with Twitter and the way that other far-right extremist groups manipulated Instagram and Facebook, I think it has made such an impact that we can't ignore that. Historically, we cannot ignore that.
Yeah, I agree, and the amount of misinformation is just incredible. I mean, there's so much you can actually be consumed by it, and so those of us who have any sense for wanting truth to get out there, we can become mired in trying to play whack-a-mole with these things on Facebook, and it doesn't do any good. And the crazy part is there's almost no issue that doesn't turn into a right versus left. I just started my campaign. Look, I've been asked by many schools to weigh in on the mascot issue. I've been invited in by school boards. I've been invited in by school board members, students, faculty, alumnus. But I never addressed my school, the school that I graduated from, which is a small school in upstate New York, not far from Saratoga, Cambridge, New York, and they're the Cambridge Indians. So a couple of weeks ago, I began to reach out to classmates and say, I can't stay silent on this anymore. It's long overdue. They're called themselves the Cambridge Indians. It's an obvious race-based mascot. But some of the immediate response I got from some classmates, most of it was pretty supportive, was somebody said, it's a fact that you're a racist. Because I brought this up, and then got accused of being on the left, and then so and all of this stuff turns into, they try to move it towards a Biden versus Trump argument, and this is just about human decency, and so everything goes cuts that way. So whether you're talking about trying to maintain some integrity to the line Black Lives Matter. And beyond the movement, beyond all of that, but just the idea that we are throwing that out there to tell people they haven't mattered, not in your culture, not in your society. So we're saying they matter. They matter now. They always mattered, but now we're going to make sure they matter now. And the pushback from the right and the right, and even right isn't even the right. I don't know. Again, when I think about things like evangelical right, which is anything but evangelical, anything but pious or righteous, it is just so crazy to see how this has all been just bastardized, and because of that, and because of all the confusion, because of all the hostilities and all the angry lines that have been drawn, and I'm angry too. I mean, every time I see I get another post of a missing or murdered Indigenous woman or man. I mean, every time I see something that has taken place, some horrendous thing that's happened to some transgender or LGBT person, or every time I see that, it isn't that it makes me sad anymore. Now I'm just pissed. And so where does it leave us? And again, in a post-election time period, when we know there's going to be so much animosity. I mean, the temperature is going to raise. You have people who have been facing evictions because of this COVID-19 stuff, and people with power turned off. There's going to be so much tension, so much pressure being put on people. Man, it's a tinderbox.
I agree. I truly. I think it's a daunting task and a daunting conversation. And I definitely think that you and I will continue to unpack this as this evolves. And as I think from community organizational point, as people begin to really start planning ahead and what this may look like and what the consequences look like. And it's daunting. It's a daunting task and a challenge to really consider what we want to do if Trump is elected. What do we want to do if Biden is elected? And I often urge people on this show, because I think that I have a platform and it's my duty to, but I really urge people to consider that no matter who gets elected, the status quo is still a problem.
Yeah.
Biden being elected doesn't change much for the people who are impoverished, for the people who are people of color impoverished. It doesn't change much for the realities of our day-to-day lives. Yes, it might look better in our international relations, because I guess he's less of a buffoon, but I still think he's a buffoon. Nonetheless, I just want to remind people that no matter who wins this election, there will still be horrors that we must deal with, because we live in a settler, colonial, capitalist society. People will still be poor. People will still be dying, whether it's by COVID, whether it's by COP. People will still have to deal with the realities of being alive in this time. And so what do we do to combat that? We organize locally within our communities.
Exactly.
Because people need to be doing that in a real way, beyond just COVID relief. People really need to be discussing what the safety measures look like if the militia comes. What do safety measures look like if the National Guard comes?
Well, and I think it's important. Look, when we say status quo, that is still a feeling. There is nothing ever stays exactly the same. It always gets worse. So, there are a bunch of Trumpers who want things to stay the way they are, and they think by reelecting Trump, they'll stay the way they are. And the problem is, it's all dynamic. Things have gotten a lot worse during the Trump administration. But people who want to support Biden saying, well, we need to return to the way it was. It wasn't that great. It wasn't that great during Obama or Clinton, or Carter or any of them. Look, there is Look, life is dynamic. It changes every single day. And if we don't pay attention, if we don't try to affect positive change, then the change will not be positive. So, while people will think that they're voting, to maintain something, you better be careful, because what you think you're maintaining is maintaining a direction that's not good.
I understand. Actually, I don't understand, but maybe I should. I see that some people really need Biden to win in terms of their own mental health, to feel as if the world isn't completely crumbling around them. But those people have had the privilege of not being, honestly, being a person of color, or being a poor person, or being a poor person of color. They've never understood what that looks like, because no presidency has ever benefited poor people of color.
No, nope.
Ever in history. And I'm not just saying that because I have my own political beliefs in this. Just look, I'm a historian. Please read a history book. You cannot escape the reality that no president has ever fixed or will solve the innate problems that are settler colonialism, that are continued imperialism, that are capitalism. Those are the three. What is it? The horsemen of the apocalypse. Yeah.
Run of the Gaius. I mean, that's why our word for the president of the United States is that he's a destroyer, and that's why it applies to every one of them. All 45, and the 46th one too. I mean. You're right, and I think we do have to understand that at some point we've got to stop the destruction. And so, look, Regan, again, sorry we missed you last week. You should. If you didn't catch last week's show with Regan Gunn, and I'm saying this to Regan too, check out the show with Janine Yazzie. She was really great. I look forward to having all three of us on the air next time.
Absolutely. I would love to share space with her. She sounds boss.
Yeah, she is. All right, thank you very much for another great show. All right, folks. Well, we'll see you back here next week. This is John Kane with Regan DeLoggins, and this is Let's Talk.